Good morning, folks. We'll wait another minute before starting so that those of you who are still trying to log in and get brought in are able to do so. So it should be a fun and interesting coffee chats.
Interesting. Wake up.
Yeah.
Loving the weather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gorgeous today.
It's why we live here.
That's what I've heard.
You don't sound convinced.
Well, I continue to hear conflicting statements about the weather and the heat wave and all of that. But all right, well, it looks like it is time for another Coffee Chats with Economic Alliance Snohomish County. I am Gary Clark, President and CEO of Economic Alliance, and I am really excited to have you all today. It's a Tuesday. You all know that means that it is Coffee Chat Day. So if you have your coffee cups, please hold them up in solidarity with me. Today we have an awesome Coffee Chats moment for you all and a presentation. But before that, you know what comes up next. It is housekeeping.
Hey.
And so with housekeeping, we want to make sure that you add your organization to your name. This is an opportunity for you to participate, and so that we see your comments and questions, and then we can have engagement. So we're really excited for this Coffee Chats moment today. Now, drum roll. I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming our speaker and presenter for today, which is Lee Mazina with Zena Consulting Strategies to Reach Diversity and Inclusion Goals. And this organization actually helps leaders to develop and reach diversity and inclusion goals through strategic communications and training facilitation. And Lee has actually added a new service, which is the EXL mediation. And this was developed last year to address increasing pandemic conflict. Now, one thing you don't know is that Lee Mazina is actually an avid martial artist, and I'm gonna assume that she has a black belt, and we both love Xena Warrior Princess. So take it away, Lee. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Checking my sound. Everyone can hear me?
Yes, you're good to go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for not being outside in this awful weather today. And no, I don't have a black belt. I've studied a lot of different martial arts and yoga as well. So I want to start by saying a little bit about us, and I think we will. Okay, I'm going to just get my. Okay, so welcome everyone, and I want you to put into the chat. I want you to get involved and stay with me the whole time. And I wonder if you could add your leadership organization or what inspired you as a leader. So maybe it was Girl Scouts, maybe it was League of Women Voters, who knows? But I want you to think about your leadership role as we re-enter a new workplace. I'm a graduate of Leadership Eastside 2017, and I know that there are some other leadership programs who are investors in Economic Alliance Snohomish County. So can I just see there, who all do we have who's focused on leadership? And I think Katie's going to be looking at screen share. I'm not getting screen share. Okay. I'm not getting your chats. Okay.
Looks like folks are slowly trickling in. So there's a few comments there.
Do we have some shy people there? Come on.
we've got,
I know from coming to this coffee chat that you're all into leadership. So I want to
yeah,
hear it.
we've got Christopher leadership from Tom. We've got
Okay.
science fiction conventions. We've got leadership Snohomish County, 2013 from Carrie. And now they're trickling in. I don't know if you can see them, Lee, but they're rolling in.
I can't. Okay. So if you read them off, oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Now I see them. Okay. Great. So the point is, everyone is a leader. And I think there is probably agreement in the room that this past year and a half has tested your leadership ability, maybe beyond reason, but this is what we're going to tap for solutions moving forward. A little bit about us, and I just, Gary, thank you for that introduction. And I love this thought that the art of communication is the language of leadership. So while I do training, facilitation, starting to do mediation, communication is the foundation of all of that. Other things I want to mention about us is that we serve Seattle to Bellingham, and we are Washington OMWBE certified as a woman-owned business, a DBE. Working with me is Ron Higgs. Ron, are you here? And Ron is in Kirkland, and Dee Knapp, who is not on the call today, and she is an attorney and a mediator. And we all have our different companies, but we have an array of services for you around mediation and communications and diversity and inclusion. So our agenda today, 3 parts, nice and simple overview, problems, good and bad, and solutions and tools. So I'm going to send you away with some tools, take with you, and you'll get a follow-up email with a tip sheet. We have some goals. We have some quizzes to keep you awake and engaged. And let me see. Let's go to the next slide. So my goals are to keep you awake and engaged. And I think, there we go. I want you to think about mediation, not just in the courtroom, but it is for everyone. We mediate ourselves all day. We mediate with other people all day. We're mediating conflict all the time. During this unusual, unprecedented time, I want you to take some time to think about the losses you've experienced, but maybe also some of the gains. And then finally, facing all of us right now as we try to jumpstart a recovery and make up for lost time and income, some tools to manage reentry. So I wonder if you could put in the chat for me, these are the goals that I hear business owners and organizational leaders talk about. Can you add some of your own that you're wrestling with right now? Just put it in the chat, and we will probably, if we can't get to questions, keep adding them, and Gary is a wonderful moderator. He's going to handle them at the end. Did I miss any goals?
Not so far. You have someone that said they're spot on. They're actually their goals.
Spot on. I love it. Okay. Next. I am advancing 2 different computers. So I want you to put in the chat, are you sick of COVID? Give me a rating. 1 is that it's okay, and 10 is that you're really sick of it. 11 is you're tearing your hair out. What do we have? How exhausted are you?
12, 100, and infinity.
Right. This is terrible, right? You're sick. And tired of this. You have pivoted so many times you're dizzy. And I would put my own score would be about a 2. I had one of the best years of my life during quarantine because I got closer to family. Okay, business wasn't great, but I had a wonderful time and I was very fortunate, very blessed I didn't get sick. But I have news for you. If you are really sick of this, if it's 100, if it's 1,000, if it's 1,000,000, guess what? Too bad. You may be done with COVID, and COVID, the pandemic, is not done with you. And that was really what motivated me to put together this toolkit, because I know everyone's tapped out. We are done with the pandemic, but it is not done with us. I'm not even going to get into the Delta variant. The data is changing so fast, I can't keep up. But I just want to acknowledge that this is really hard, and we just have to keep acknowledging that. And I think we get busy and we just keep trying to push. And there's a real value in just acknowledging that things are hard. I went too far. I am, okay. We skip ahead here. This skipped ahead. So I am, you know, Katie, I wonder if you could grab the, because this is not advancing. 2021 facts, the pandemic isn't over. Right now, as of today, CDC says 99% of people who died from COVID are unvaccinated. So now we have vaccine difficulties and issues rising. We know that the elder populations are well vaccinated, but we were having rising deaths in younger people, and now we're worried about children. We also know, because we've been doing this for a while now, that one size doesn't fit all with the problems we're facing that may get us over the pandemic. And then lastly, returning to work, we pretty much are counting on some kind of hybrid workplace model in the future. And this is going to impact many industries, businesses, and organizations. So on top of infinity and tolerance, now you have to pivot again for this new workplace. Everyone mediates. So this is what prompted me to add this mediation service. And I've been working on this for a while because I felt that the mediation process was not inclusive culturally, and it was also not inclusive of different kinds of people from different education levels. It's very hierarchical, it's very formal, and it's not, mediation is not just about the courthouse. Mediation is something we do every day. Everyone mediates. I wanted to come up with a way to think about mediation that helps leaders think about it as an everyday activity from a leadership point of view. Also to see communication as the foundation of mediation and resolving conflict as a preventative measure. So what can you do as a leader to communicate so that there's less conflict? And like I said, we're not going to cover this, but resolving conflict, talking about differences more accessible to everyone. So preventing conflict by anticipating a variety of stakeholders' needs, and that is being inclusive, whatever inclusive means to your organization. Reducing conflict when it arises through quality leadership and strategy, and then resolving conflict using and managing it using the right people, skills, and tools. So do we have any questions so far that, Gary, that you want to shout out to me, or do you want to hold them till the end?
We can hold till the end, but
Okay.
That's a good heads up for folks to throw some questions into the chat if you have them.
Okay. Again, here's what I noticed about pandemics and shifts I've seen. So my background is sociology and communications. What really motivated me was in the restaurant and hospitality industry and in government and in public health. public health especially, at any public facing or essential workers, the numbers of hostile incidences, harassment, threats, even deaths over COVID conflict has rose. Obviously, it wasn't an issue before COVID, but people were getting angrier faster and being violent. We see this in the air, 200% increase in violent episodes on airplanes, unprecedented. During 2020, the quarantine, teen depression, suicide attempts, child hunger increased, domestic violence increased, all kinds of other factors, societal factors increased. And I just think, do we have the energy and the skills to deal with all that's being thrown at us right now? What is, and I want you to write a question to yourself or put it in the chat, what is the new abnormal like in your world? What are you facing that you can't rely on going back to the way things were? That's going to factor your leadership and your management in the future. And lastly, we know that when uncertainty is high and sustained, and there's no end in sight, which is the case we're in right now, people find it harder to use more complex skills. Perhaps that's why we're seeing more violence, more people lashing out in public towards strangers. We're seeing uncivil behavior. And my thought in creating this was, is there something you can do as a leader to lay the foundation for your organization, maybe to have less hostility, maybe to de-escalate people? Everyone who voted on how intolerant and how burned out they are, remember, everyone in your workplace has their own score, and many of them are as maxed out as you are. I'm repeating myself a lot because this is something, it's easy to sweep under the rug, and I don't believe that's a good leadership tactic. So here are some of the differences driving conflict. Remember, not all conflict is unproductive. Some of it can be wonderful learning experience, even if we didn't ask for the lesson. But these are some differences that I'm looking at that can create positive or negative conflict. These can cross the line into abuse. And these are internal and external factors that we are juggling all the time. So I want us to just take a moment and look at this list here. And go ahead and put in the chat if I left out anything that is impacting conflict in your life or in your organization. My coffee cup says the future is human. Okay. Are you there?
Yep, they're
Do we have anything in chat?
They're thinking.
Yeah, they're thinking. Are you looking away from the computer? Come on.
They are thinking. Okay, here's one thought. Age discomfort.
Okay.
From Karen, and then another thought. Groupthink acceptable. Finances from Catherine. And then there's a longer message from Heather. Any thought the rise in violence is because people could not get out, and she says she personally spent some time on the phone talking through isolation issues.
Thank you. Those are wonderful issues. Yes.
Thanks for sharing that, Heather.
Yes, thank you. And that's why I mentioned domestic violence, because women especially who are victims or survivors of domestic violence, they were stuck during COVID, as were children, sometimes in unsafe situations. It was dangerous to be at home. It was dangerous to not be at home.
Right.
And part two. So I'm going to ask you to all really focus for a little bit here because we're going to do pop quiz. And we're going to look at the problems caused by the pandemic, starting with a glance back at 2020. I know we all want to just like forget about it, but it's important moving forward that we see where we are coming from. This is going to impact your recovery in your organization or even in your personal life. But even if your business was booming last year, and there were many, you can still have some good problems. So we are going to talk about problems, but one of the good problems is that a side effect impact is that you still have to meet demands of re-entry in the workplace. But I know some of you are manufacturers and you have the good problem of too much work and you have problems in the supply line. So you still have to figure out all of these issues when you are so tapped out. It's like you have a newborn and everything happens at once. You move, the car breaks down. We're tapped out, and I think we need to recognize this. So here's your pop quiz. I want you to look away from the screen, and I want you to look in the upper right corner of the room. So we're doing a little eye exercise here. We're getting a little break from the screen. Don't cheat, everybody. Look into the upper right corner, and when I cue up the next slide, you're going to look back when I tell you, and you're going to shout out. Katie's going to unmute you, and you're going to shout out or just say out loud your gut reaction to the next slide. What do you do when you see this? Are you all looking away? Okay. You're unmuted. Let's hear some dogs. Okay. What do? You look outside of your home or out or taking a hike, and this is what you see. What do you do? Tell me.
Call 911.
Call 911.
Holy shit.
Oh, no.
Right. What do you physically do?
Run.
You run. You run. You run for your life. Right? Okay. Okay. One more quiz. Everyone, look up into the left corner of the room. Please. And when you look back at the screen, I want you to tell me, what do you do when you see any of these situations? What do you do?
Pick them up.
Right?
Help, intercede.
Right, right. You do something. You do something. You don't have to think. You know what to do. It is instinctive. You don't have to own a child. You don't have to be a parent to know these are dangerous situations. You know you have to do something. You know what to do. If you're in a fire, you know to run. Even animals know what to do. Did you notice we all had pretty similar reactions? And this is because we are all human. We're all programmed more or less the same. But here's what happened in 2020. We all went through something, but everyone's experience was different. This is really obvious, and I want to say it again because it's easy to forget. I think we will recover faster and create more responsive and successful and sustainable workplaces and solutions if we take the time to pause. I know we're tired. Take the time to pause and listen and acknowledge what people have been through. The people we lead, the people we manage want to be heard. They need to be heard. And this is a conversation that we can facilitate for you. And I'll just give you one example. I was at a networking event with someone I hadn't seen in 3 years from LE. And we were talking nice, light talk. And I said, how are you? And she just broke down crying. Her dear brother died. He's a firefighter. And he was volunteering, and he died from heat exhaustion. And she needed to talk for 20 minutes and cry, and she couldn't go to his funeral. Okay, take a minute just for yourself and think about the fact that we all have stories like, many of us have stories like that. Many people lost people, businesses, futures. As much as we want to move on, I think it's important to pause and reflect. Any questions or comments at this point?
There was a comment from Tom, basically
Okay.
said COVID is getting too much attention. It is as if the opioid crisis vanished, as if it doesn't make the news. So,
Okay. Right. So we all don't agree on media and coverage and priorities. That makes perfect sense to me. I know people just say, I don't want to hear, I don't care about it, I just don't want to hear about it. I cannot listen to one more thing. And that's fine, but what if your organization really has to address some issues before you can move forward into a hybrid model or whatever solutions you have to come up with moving forward? We don't even know what the schools are going to look like this fall. So we have to be on our toes, even if we're tired. And this is why I wanted to develop some tools that I hope you would find helpful. So the pandemic is really different. This is new. We've never done this before. And here's some reasons I think about why it was so different. We didn't know what to do. This is the first time. Again, we all went through something, but we don't have a lot of shared experiences. We were isolated, and we're just now getting back out. The newness means change, and human beings don't like change. That's normal. Why does this matter at work? And we can mute everyone again, Katie. But the top sources of conflict, regardless of the pandemic, top sources of conflict are around relationships, values, and tasks. And can you put into the chat, and I'm going to give you a minute to think about it, how one of these three factors has been impacted by the pandemic, or reentry problems you're facing around relationships, values, or tasks. Okay, so can someone tell me a little bit more about, okay, all of them, tasks, more time for core relationships, more difficult to build new ones. Okay. Can you elaborate? I don't know, Katie, can you either unmute Heather and Tom, or a couple people, or can you put in the chat? What is it about the tasks?
Yeah, my point was that it's hard to go deeper in new relationships with social distancing, but people you have a core relationship with, it's easier to improvise based on what's possible. But new relationships tend to stay surface.
Okay. Tasks changed from doing work and to trying to get to work. Gary, what do you mean by that?
Is that Jerry?
Jerry, sorry.
That's okay. I've been called worse. I have a small consulting firm in the aviation industry, airlines, airports, regulators. And as we all know, airlines have been creamed globally by the ripple effect of the pandemic. And so, whereas before we had plenty of work to do, now everybody's gun shy about contracting to bring someone in to do work. So 100% of my time right now, or pretty close to it, is working on getting new contracts so that we have work to perform.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I see a lot of, even if it's a task is something you identified, it seems to me that relationships are, and relationship building is going to be key. And see how relationships have changed. Difference of opinion of values regarding getting back into the office versus staying safe. Some feel it's important to get back in person, but the guidance is changing rapidly. Yes, sometimes daily. And now we might have to be having mandated masks again. That was fun the first time. It's going to be more fun the second time. How do we balance the interest in seeing each other versus keeping everyone safe? No one has the answers. They're different for everyone. So hopefully I can provide you with some guidelines that may be helpful. And lastly, I want to say that I volunteer for the Department of Enterprise Services Business Diversity BDAG, Business Diversity Committee, Advisory Committee. And so I'm part of a group of small business owners who are trying to give input to the state about how to make the procurement and policy process more equitable for small minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. But here's the thing. According to the SBA's Office of Advocacy, the economic impact on the pandemic, although it varied from place to place, metropolitan and coastal areas were the hardest hit. We know some industries suffered more than others. We know the largest declines were in restaurants and transportation services. The disproportionate metropolitan impacts contributed to differences across demographic categories, with Black and Asian business owners suffering the most. In general, small businesses suffered the most. If you're a small business owner, this is no surprise. Why does this matter? Because Economic Alliance Snohomish County, you are looking holistically at the region. Whether you are a small minority woman or veteran-owned business, we know that small businesses are still the backbone of the economy. So they're on top of the personal losses and difficulties in 2020 and the personal adjustments in 2021 moving forward. Small businesses are juggling generally more than larger businesses, and we need small businesses in our economy to thrive. So I want to return to my leadership approach here, and with what we do in adaptive leadership model is we put problems into two buckets. They're adaptive or they're technical. But we want to know what is the problem and who owns it. So you've mentioned many of the problems you see and that you're struggling with. And then who owns it? Well, it depends. And the pandemic is sneaky, and the pandemic is shifting the problem. Now the variant problem is, it may be with children in the fall. So everyone who's a parent or anyone who has a child or anyone who cares about children is going to be nervous about that. How do we prepare for a hybrid workplace when the parts keep moving? So let's go to some solutions. I'm going to kind of pick up the speed here because I want to have time for your questions. And I don't want to take the time right now, but I want you to just think about or write down what you have lost. Not to share it, but make sure you take some time for yourself to do that. As we enter the fall, we may see a new game of mask on, mask off. That brings its own challenges. We have a lot more data about what works in terms of protecting people, but we can't apply that to every situation across the board. So I just want us to keep thinking about mediation is for everyone, reflect on our losses and gains, keep the conversations going to build relationships, and look at tools to manage the change. We're looking at trying to return to pre-pandemic profit levels. We want to attract and keep good customers. We want to reduce re-entry conflict. And any other issues that people are, I just wanted to pause right now and just so we have some questions at the end. We have time for any other issues that people are facing specifically around, adjusting to the environment of getting back to work. Gary, do you have anything there?
Not yet.
Okay. So I'm going to just keep moving.
We do have one from
Okay.
Tom. Vaccine guidelines and mandates.
Okay. What about that, Tom? Tom is joining us from Chicago.
Tom, if you're unmuted, I think you're allowed to chime in here.
Now the host is allowing. You just asked anything else that's in the conversation about back to work and not. And I said, how do you do the communication around vaccines? So I put vaccine guidelines mandates.
Okay.
So it's a concern, not a solution.
Right. So thank you. That's the next point here is that what I think of as a mediation moment. So this is exactly a mediation moment. And we can look at what do we agree on. I don't know what the answers are. They're different for every group. They're different for every team, organization. What do we agree on? What are our goals moving forward? And what am I willing to give up? One of the best things I learned from the Leadership East Side program and the adaptive leadership model is that win-win is not a reality. Everyone loses something in mediation, negotiation, in conflict. You have to give up something, most likely. So what are you willing to give up? I just want to backtrack a little bit, and I've mentioned people getting really hostile, some people getting violent. So mediation only works with people who are in agreement with you around the values of being civil and safe. We cannot mediate with anyone who is violent, who is out of control, who doesn't want to find common ground, or who doesn't have the skills or desire to resolve conflict. If they have to win 100%, it's not worth mediating with them. It's not worth trying to resolve conflict with them. Some people call those people bullies, but it can be very difficult. I think it's a waste of time. If we can't agree on basic principles, then we're wasting our time. So a lot of the work I do is around diversity inclusion. And I have a lot of tools that I think are very applicable to the challenges facing us. And one of my favorite tools is Geert Hofstede's cultural dimension. So I'm trying to give you the big picture of how we might want to frame some of the conflict we're dealing with at work. In a longer session, I would go through some of these and get a lot of feedback from you about which are important and which might impact the situations you're facing at work. But in the interest of time, I'm gonna answer for you. Individualism is the #1 issue, I think, of the cultural dimensions that makes it difficult for us to mediate all the conflict we're facing right now. So we see the United States has the highest values around individualism as opposed to collectivism. If you are a member of US mainstream dominant culture, this is the dominant system you are most likely raised with. And that might have been your family system, and that might be your family system now, and that might be the system that you're working in, is dominant culture USA, mainstream values. So you can be a person from a subculture that values collective thinking and collective action, but if your organization is USA mainstream focused on individualism, that's going to impact how issues get resolved. And another point about this is that people, when they are at their most stressed, are likely to default to the societal norms they were raised with. Looking at it from an organizational systems point of view, a leader or an organization is likely to be less flexible when under stress.
We do have a question here, Karen, Lee from Karen,
Okay.
who asks, is there an age demographic involved with the individualism as well?
No, there's gender, but I'm not aware of the cultural dimensions. I'm not aware of it. Age is not a separate dimension. Does that answer your question?
She responds, so it's not something that has been developing.
So then I want to move to, thank you. I want to move to cultural competency. This is another tool that I use, and this is from Executive Diversity Services. And these are steps that you can take borrowing from the cultural competency toolkit to prevent, reduce, and resolve conflict. Repeat as needed. The first step is self-knowledge. The second step is empathy. I would add to this, as I mentioned before, while we don't think of sympathy as a part of this process, due to the losses people have had in their personal lives, I would actually add sympathy for this extenuating circumstance of the pandemic. Flexibility, it's really hard to be flexible when you're tapped out. These are necessary steps. Curiosity. I don't think any of us are terribly curious now. And tolerance for ambiguity. maybe this is a long-term gift of the pandemic is I think we are all having to deal with that ambiguity, maybe not as perfectly as we'd like, but it is a factor that we've constantly been dealing with. So I will send you a tip sheet that highlights these points. And this is just something I put together to just try to have us remember as we're dealing with people and the challenges at work. And this is where your role as a leader really comes into play, to help remember that people are frustrated, angry, and confused. Remember, everyone's experience has been unique to them. Law enforcement and policies may continue to vary. We may see that change very many times. We just don't know. There's so much ambiguity. We don't have to agree 100% to work together. And lastly, respect is contagious. We can maintain respect of ourselves and others. Everything is easier to get through. Could you put in the chat, please, for me, a takeaway? And we do have time for some final questions. Okay. And we have a lot of, well, we have 5 minutes left for questions. So the question about it is individualism related to a sense of entitlement. I don't know that, I guess, I don't think this is the right format to talk about that, but yes. I do want to get to the questions though. Takeaways and questions.
Lee, do you want to open this screen up for everyone, or do you want to leave it here?
No, let's open it up.
Okay.
Let's just see. We have, oh, you can contact me. These are the freebies I offer. And mostly I just want to open up the screen and use the last, we have about 5 minutes left.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All right, folks.
Okay. Ron Higgs from Wolf Management says, respect is contagious. Yes. Some people are comfortable with ambiguity, and some are not. Okay, tips for helping them increase their comfort. How about structure? That especially is helpful to people.
Yeah, Lee, looks like that's a lead-in question for you as well, from Karen. What are your thoughts on those expansion of tips to increase comfort?
Relationship building. When you get to know people and what they're going through and you take that time, they feel comfortable and they can relax when they have been heard.
Okay. And looks like there's another question here, navigating mask versus no mask, going back to the office, tips on that, and tips on navigating the difficult comfort levels, because everyone has their own comfort level.
So the one point I really want to emphasize about that, and thank you for that question, is again, it's important to not make assumptions and to ask and to get to know people and listen to why they are concerned, listen to why they don't want to be vaccinated. Why aren't they wearing a mask?
Mhm.
There were factors that I never would have thought of. One of them was some people weren't vaccinated because they could not afford to miss the day of work or 2 days of work that they might have to miss if they had a reaction to their COVID shot. Their financial situation was that close. They wanted to be vaccinated. They couldn't take that risk. Other people can't get to a vaccination site. I know someone who knows someone who had an extreme reaction. When we judge people without information and we make assumptions that are negative, that ends the conversation.
Mm.
And I like this point from Tamar. I assume everyone needs to talk even if they say they're good. And I would add, maybe because people have different conversational and communication and cultural styles, sometimes direct conversation might feel uncomfortable for someone. They might not want to express themselves that way, but asking them to write about it or just, and I have a process for that where everyone has an ability, it's an exercise where you can map for yourself what happened to you, how you feel, losses, gains, resilience you've learned about. And I can take you through that process, and then you can share what you want, but you have that for yourself to keep. And I think for a leader to offer that process is, you can't sit down with every person necessarily, depending on how many people you're leading, and find out their story, but you've asked them to go through that process, and that's telling them that it matters. And then maybe through that process, they will bring up the points that they want to work on to be part of your organization more fully.
Okay. Right, right. It's not personal if they don't want to talk.
Thank you. As an extrovert, I need that reminder.
So, Lee, maybe this is an opportunity for kind of your final thoughts and parting shots for the group. Do you have any final statements you'd like to give to the overall group as they're here?
Thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy the tip sheet, and I hope you've enjoyed this, and I appreciate your time. And I think if we can take a deep breath and try to be kind and patient, somehow we will get through this.
All right, all right. Well, are there any final questions? We want to make sure that we haven't left anyone out in the cold who simply has a question that they have not asked to wrap up. So we have another minute or so that we could use for Lee to answer one additional question.
I love this. Even just don't give up on talking or getting close in some way, even with small gestures. Sometimes the small gestures are speak volumes.
Right. Well, I guess in wrapping up, the question that's been asked mostly from most folks is tied to comfort level, how to adjust, but we realize that we're not quite out of the woods yet, and we have obviously the Delta variant to figure out and get through, and so as people are continuing to have their own perspective on how they feel, we just appreciate you bringing this opportunity for us to figure out how to handle and wrestle with these questions and concerns, Lee. So I want to thank you again. I'm gonna call you Lee Mazina, the warrior princess, as we've learned. We appreciate you coming to join us. Everyone who has a cup, even if you're not virtually showing the screen, you know how we do it. Coffee cups in the air. And yeah, we really want to thank you all for joining today. This has been another coffee chats with Economic Alliance Snohomish County. But guess what? We have another event coming up. So on August 3rd at 8:30 a.m., same time, State of Tourism is our subject for next week. So if you're thinking about what you have in mind for traveling in these coming months or beyond, this is a great opportunity to hear what's happening, considering the state of COVID-19. But also, it seems like we've had some amazing weather as well. So we hope to see you there, August 3rd, 8:30 a.m. Join us online, Economic Alliance, Snohomish County. Thank you all very much for joining us. Have an amazing day. Take care.